This is the Western Hemisphere, end of turn 4. Now, the most important thing that happened here is the Russians decided they wanted to increase the potential size of the front so they could dilute NATO's defensive forces against them. So they declared war on Austria here. Now, immediately, the other neutral nations start getting a bit wobbly. Yugoslavia, they thought, there's not a lot we can do here. We've got a poorly equipped army, badly exposed strategically along a long border. It'll just probably be a rerun of what happened in 1941, I think it was. The Greeks decided, well, no, we should be committed to NATO, and the neutral nations are getting picked off. We're joining NATO. So that was all the diplomatic moves. In terms of the front lines, we've got the war in the Middle East. Syria has been knocked out of the war, first nation to surrender. Its last city fell in the last turn to the Israelis. Turkish forces are pulling out of Syria now and heading north because the situation in Anatolia is really bad. There's a defence line forming in central Anatolia, but the forces in the eastern Anatolian area have been finally wiped out, those two pockets, so the Russian army will be streaming westward to enter Turkey. Another thing on the Turkish front and the Balkans, we've got the Russians have punched a hole all the way through to the Turkish Straits here. They're very close to Istanbul. They've isolated large Turkish forces who are receiving supplies from this report here, and they've got American strategic reserves landed to try and help them out. Greek forces have moved into the line against Bulgarian forces wherever possible. Albania, that was already Warsaw Pact committed, now has a border with a NATO country. Let's just ignore the cat. The Greeks and the Albanians are standing each other off. In terms of situation in Iran, there's a front line forming all the way down the mountains on the borders of the western Iran. These US forces are pretty much, they're sort of isolated, but they're quite powerful. So the Russians are not really doing much in terms of attacking, but they're going to have to try and wipe those American forces out soon. We've got Iranian sort of guards and loyalist units are trying to get rid of the remaining NATO occupied areas here. They'll be gone soon. Russians, there's the reins of the Iranian rebel army here, which has practically had it. There's a Russian unit there in striking distance of all those cities still in control of NATO. So all in all, apart from what's happening in Turkey, it's fairly static in the Gulf and in Western Asia. We go to the northern front here. We've got forces from Norway are gradually moving north, and the Russians have pretty much run out of steam. They just cannot force those mountain passes without serious air support, and the weather conditions up north are awful and have been all game. We've got Denmark. Whole of Jutland's been conquered by the Warsaw Pact. Warsaw Pact naval forces have landed near Copenhagen. NATO units have responded to effectively cut them off there. We've got Austria situation. The Austrians held out quite well for the first turn of the Russians, but they gradually got pulverized, so their morale's pretty much collapsed and they're in a demoralized state. They've only got a couple of units left on the board, and if they lose their final city here, they are going to be forced to surrender as well. I've just moved the cat out of the way. Yep, on the Western Front, where the German front, you've got the Soviets are continuing pushing forward. They've sort of created this big bulge in the Allied line, and they're not far from the Rhine. They're well within reach of the Rhine in the time they've got to win this war. But the problem is the Allied air forces are getting stronger all the time because Russian forces have been whittled down, and also the Russians have got lower maintenance roles, so it's harder for them to get their aircraft back up into the air. Now the Russians are considering their next move. What we've done with chemical warfare, because both sides pretty much are chemical capable all over the place, we've sort of role played it in the fact that the Russians haven't actually decided to use chemicals, and NATO won't use them because they've got a policy of not using them first, allegedly. Depends how desperate things get. But I've got a house rule in place that if one side decides to go chemical, they get a +1 shift to the right on all their attacks in the first portion of the first turn. So it's like an impulse. They'd like have, if you looked at Russia here, you've got your first impulse. In that first echelon, you would get a +1, and they're probably going to go chemical to see if they can force this front open. Obviously the Allies will immediately go chemical afterwards, so from after the first sort of impulse, everybody who's chemical capable it'll just counter each other out. So that's a bit it really. It's all to play for. The Russians can still win this, though it's starting to look a bit shaky for them. They really do need to make some serious progress in the central front here in Germany.